Our intervention focuses on misinformation that threatens to undermine our renewable transmission build-out. And the reason why we're focusing on transmission is because it really is the backbone for all of our transition and decarbonisation ambitions over the next upcoming decades. To meet our 83% targets by 2030 of renewable energy in the national electricity market, Australia needs to build out 4,000 additional kilometres of transmission line by 2030 and 10,000 additional kilometres by 2050. And we're already falling behind schedule. And this is bad for many reasons. Not only are we not going to meet our targets for decarbonisation, but every year of delay costs Australians $12.5 billion, and we can't afford to delay any further. And it's really a lack of community support driven by misinformation about these transmission lines, which threatens to delay and even derail entire transmission build-out projects. And to show you how misinformation might spread through a community that might be affected by a potential transmission build-out, I want you to meet our friend here, Jo. Now, Jo's from the lovely, picturesque rural town of Nudgeville, and she loves to drink tea. That's the most important thing about her, but also a few other things. So like 77% of Australians, she's a strong believer in climate science and climate action, but yet every day she's been bombarded with so many conflicting bits of information about the proposed transmission line, which is proposed to go through Nudgeville. You know, on one hand, she listens to the news and the radio and she hears about the critical importance of our electricity and transmission build-out, but on the other hand, she sees on social media, she's part of a Facebook group as well, about local news, and she sees and hears from her peers about some of the supposed risks of transmission. It affects your sleep. There are some radiation risks. In fact, all of this is misinformation, but Jo and people like her that our intervention is trying to target are particularly susceptible to these forms of misinformation. And there's three key behavioural sort of reasons why Jo and people like her are so much at risk. And the first one here is social norms and messenger bias. So Jo puts really undue weight on the messages of her peers in her local community, and she does discount the messages from sort of corporations and governments from afar as she sees it. So that's number one. Number two is this sense of cognitive overload, which she doesn't have the skills to address adequately. Remember, she's hearing and seeing all these conflicting news stories, and it's just so overwhelming for her that she is more susceptible to quick thinking and irrational thinking when she sees these messages of misinformation. And number three, affect heuristic as well. So in a lot of these real-life Facebook groups that we see across not only the Australian build-out, but build-out across the world, a lot of these messages of misinformation are particularly sensationalist. So there is examples of transmission lines collapsing, even though, in fact, that is very rare, but the imagery is very evocative and it sticks in Jo's mind. So these are the three that we want to particularly focus on. Question is, how do we address those?
Yes, so Chicago economists, 1970s, they started a new field, law and economics, and they faced a challenge in trying to get judges, federal judges, to adopt those practices. And so they started what's called the Mann Institute for Federal Judges, which was a 2-week retreat, and it included a curriculum taught by leading Nobel Prize-winning economists and attracted judges from across the political spectrum. The retreat actually led to long-lasting, decade-long effects on judicial judgments. And we think, well, why am I telling you the story? We think there's an opportunity to reframe the idea of misinformation, not as an individual level issue, but as a community level issue, and as a result, a leadership challenge. And we want to harness the power of using a retreat like the Chicago Economists to deliver meaningful change in regional communities and to uplift those communities. There's 4 key steps to our approach. Start by selecting the leaders, then they attend, then they come back to their communities and facilitate discussions over tea, and then they implement, the participants implement again with tea. The tea will be explained shortly by Beck, and we think collectively that these steps will address the behavioural challenges outlined in the previous slide.
The program will help community leaders become climate leaders as they help the people around them navigate through the transition. And they'll be encouraged to join the program through a range of factors or nudges, including social status. The program will be highly prestigious with a rigorous selection process. This will involve referees explaining who in the community would be a trusted facilitator of discussions about the climate. Secondly, through loss aversion by highlighting the risk of missing out on the benefits of the program. And third, by using leaders' existing intrinsic motivation to create positive change in their community. And the curriculum of the program could cover a range of topics, including the importance of the climate transition, the role of regional communities in this transition, and the effect of misinformation about things like transmission lines on broader discussions about the transition. They'll be provided with techniques to combat misinformation, and they'll provide these techniques, debunking and pre-bunking techniques, to people involved in the workshops that they facilitate. This happens after the program, and in particular, they will highlight the importance of slowing down with a cup of tea to use these strategies. And this uses, firstly, social norms, as everyone is listening to a trusted leader in the community explain the role of misinformation. Secondly, messenger effect, by using a trusted leader in the community to explain why the climate transition is important and the effect that misinformation can have. And third, by creating salience around making people notice when they might be receiving potentially false information about transmission lines, for instance, and encouraging them to pause and slow down with a cup of tea and use System 2 thinking and consciously reflect with the strategies that the leaders will encourage them to use. In particular, we think this will involve improved information reception due to the credibility of the leader. The discussion will be specific to the context of the community. And as a result, the program will also have a range of other benefits for the community.
With that, we believe our community program would be highly effective because it's a community-centric, community-led solution embedded in the principles of behavior science. So it creates capability within the community members to identify and slow down around misinformation. And also, it's a genuinely consultative process where community comes together and equips them with skills to effectively participate in these discussions and gives an opportunity of being understood. Thank you.